Today's breakfast, however, is an opportunity to sift fact from fiction when it comes to the topic of nuclear. For context, Australia is not on track to meet its emission reduction commitments, and the stuttering energy transition nationally is costing industrial companies dearly. Until recently, nuclear energy has been routinely excluded from climate change and policy discussions in Australia, even though every other country regards it as an important part of the solution. Nuclear is complementary to renewables, particularly in the context of industrial heat, where renewables cannot meet this challenge. Nuclear is the only proven, scalable, zero-emissions energy source, which is not weather dependent.
We've got 5 key topics to talk about. I was just saying maybe they're doonas, maybe they're comfort levels that we need to give policymakers to make sure that we are on the right path with nuclear.
There are 32 countries in the world operating nuclear plants today, and as Rebecca said, there are an additional 50 countries that are considering or actively implementing nuclear energy programs and building new plants today. How long would it take in Australia? I think a country like Australia can move very quickly. We're also not starting from scratch. We have a lot of nuclear infrastructure existing in this country.
Australia does have quite a lot of experience in building a nuclear reactor. We've actually had 3 nuclear reactors here in Australia.
What do you get when you invest that period of time? Well, you get a low carbon baseload energy generating asset with a life of 60 to 80 to 100 years. And when we talk about building assets that have that lifetime, then you're starting to actually talk in terms that are long enough to bring those generational benefits.
We follow the news and we see how publicized and politicized the issue around cost of nuclear power plays out in the press, and you say, we got it all wrong, folks. There are 30 countries around the globe that generate nuclear power, and pick a number, another 30 or 50 contemplating nuclear power, but it's too expensive for Australia. We're missing something here. But when we look at the average levelized cost of electricity, so nuclear always comes out as the lowest cost in terms of average cost of electricity.
Radioactive waste used nuclear fuel isn't a problem waiting to be solved. We have solutions. They're being implemented internationally, and they're being implemented in Australia as well. Those solutions are safe, they're effective, and they're sustainable.
There's multiple industries here in South Australia and across Australia that are storing radioactive waste safely.
In countries that have nuclear power, there are funds available to support the costs of the waste management solution. And Australia has significant expertise in radioactive waste management. The quantities of waste that are generated from nuclear power plants and any nuclear facilities are negligible, especially when compared with other energy generation technologies. That it is absolutely possible to obtain community consent and social license for radioactive waste management facilities and nuclear fuel cycle activities to be established. There are established processes for doing so. We have run those processes in Australia successfully. It's about trust, respect, accountability, and transparency. There are many examples around the world of communities competing with each other to host radioactive waste management facilities.
If you're in your community that lives near a nuclear power plant or next to a nuclear power plant, your annual dose of additional background radiation per year is the equivalent to eating 1 banana.
You actually need a lot of radiation to cause any harm. Much, much more than what you would get, say, from Fukushima and also Chernobyl outside of those immediate first responders. But we do need to have this conversation with the public. We need to educate them better on radiation effects, their radiation exposure. Nuclear power is the safest form of energy per terawatt produced by far.
When we take a look at sites, first going from the technical perspective, many of you are here in the mining industry, for example, and so you would be quite familiar with the process to site a mining or an industrial facility. And siting a nuclear power plant would be much the same in terms of the things that you need to consider. Is it an ideal location, not necessarily from the resources perspective, but from the use cases? Are there off-takers of electricity or heat there that would be ideal for having a nuclear power plant there? And then you would need to do the standard things like environmental impact statements, check things, how things are seismically in the area. Do you have access to cooling water? So it's similar to what you would be considering for any other industrial facilities. And of course, community and stakeholder engagement would be incredibly important for siting a nuclear power plant. So we obviously have coal plants here that are providing a lot of electricity. When we look at our decarbonization targets, we will still need some sort of clean, firm power beyond renewables in order to make that happen. And the good thing about retiring coal plants is that you already have existing infrastructure there in terms of access to cooling water, access to the grid, and a site that has already been studied and has some sort of environmental impact statement. Those are ideal locations to be able to repower with new generation options, and some places could potentially accommodate a larger reactor in the ones that are already available today, or SMRs are a really great option as well, because again, they're scalable to the use case, and many of them, or some of them, have been certified to not have an emergency planning zone around them, so they can be sited much closer to population centers or industrial facilities. Another use case that we might consider are remote locations, and these could be mining sites or other communities that only use a little bit of power and have a microgrid, and so microreactors would be ideal for these locations, for example, in order to give them power, but also not have to rely on flying in a bunch of diesel for diesel generation.
Well, there are quite a number of regulatory steps that need to be taken to site a nuclear power plant, as you can imagine, and they really fall into two general categories. The first, you walk through your planning and environmental approval process. But as well, for nuclear plants, we would have an independent nuclear regulatory body that would review nuclear specific aspects of the site, check that it is able to actually accommodate the particular technology that we're looking to put there, and that the future owner-operator has the requisite knowledge and ability to safely construct and operate the nuclear power plant. So there is a rigorous siting process that would happen.
Then it comes down to mitigation of climate change.
When we look at our decarbonization targets, we will still need some sort of clean, firm power beyond renewables in order to make that happen. I think Australia has great renewable resources in terms of solar and wind, but you get to a saturation point where you need something else to back that up. And what I like to see is a diversity of energy sources, and really nuclear being an option to be able to support the amount of renewable electricity we already have and are developing.
Industrial heat sector has about 21% of Australia's emissions, which is more than the transport sector. And it's a key question is how we're going to get there by 2050 to decarbonise that part of the economy.
As long as you allow time for your community to come to an understanding of what the proposition is on the table, and to engage in a respectful conversation with as many community members as possible, and to have understanding of the merits and the benefits that come from that technology's introduction, then you can get a successful outcome.
I mean, there's the cost to do it, and then there's the cost not to do it. What we need is to have this conversation.